We want the Park Service to take this down, let elk out, and then they can go over 71,000 acres of Point Reyes National Seashore. The only reason they're in here is for cattle ranching.
You folks have done a remarkable thing. We all have made a remarkable achievement. Think what you want of this deal, criticize it or not as a compromise, or pushing too hard, or what have you. Because of the activism in this room, depicted in part on this screen, when this deal goes through, and we're here to make sure it goes through, all the Tule elk will be reunited for the first time since they were reintroduced to the park in 1978, first time in 46 years, as it said on the screen, as they should be in a national park where wild animals have been fenced for the cattle industry. And also, thousands of the cows will be moved out. They have no business, commercial cattle operations of any size, polluting a national seashore. No one can disagree with that. And now I'm going to put my activist hat on. Which is to say, this is speaking, there's disparate voices in this room, as there must be. That's the beauty of this. I don't even know if it's fancy enough to call a coalition. A variety of voices. That's our strength. Diversity is our strength. We're not all going to agree on everything. There are people in this room who are worried about what I'm going to say, and don't blow up the deal. I am, for the record, 100% in support of the deal that was financed by the Nature Conservancy of all people in the last year. Thank you, Nature Conservancy. Which concludes a mediated settlement that all parties signed, brought by Western Watersheds Project, who is represented here today, Resource Renewal Institute, that I don't think is represented here today, and the Center for Biological Diversity, also not represented here today for a variety of reasons. Those three groups were certainly pivotal in getting us to this place. So I want to shout out to them, to the Nature Conservancy, to all the activists, to In Defense of Animals, to Turtle Island Restoration Network, who's here today. Ken's my co-host in putting this event together with In Defense of Animals. Amy, I have something for you, by the way, don't forget. It's over there. So, what's happening now is the cattle empire is striking back. Two different lawsuits. I won't go into detail. I don't want to take up a lot of time. I swear, Matt Maguire, you won't have to get the grappling hook on me today. But we need to not be timid. We need to speak up and be more fervent and vocal and passionate and sincere than ever before if we want to continue getting all the cows out of the park. Again, they have no business being there. They're polluting, they're for profit. Ken Brower, who's here today and is going to speak, taught me it's an extractive industry. So now me personally, with my activist hat, Jack Gescheidt, for True Spirit and for In Defense of Animals, it doesn't really matter if you move them out of the park, which we want and we're advocating, and just put them across some arbitrary human border over here. Problem solved. No. Not if you believe in science, in climate science, in global warming, in the methane gas that comes out of the cattle industry, whether they're big or small, it doesn't matter. This is a major contributor to the climate crisis, and unlike, how many people drove a gasoline car here today? Yeah, exactly. It's really hard. It's so easy to say, oh, get out of your car, because nobody's gonna frickin' do it. But change your diet a little bit? That is just low-hanging fruit, man. At the very least, like Michael Pollan, you don't have to travel to the fifth distant star, Vega, to become one of those vegans, God forbid. Just eat less meat and dairy. Eat less meat and less dairy. So there I go. I use the V word, for which I'm not sorry. That's the bigger picture. So, Hi, folks. Welcome here. It's so glad to see you all. So I'm going to leave it at that. God knows I could go on another 10 minutes. As you know, the people who know me do. I would like to introduce an incredible guy I've gotten friendly with recently producing this event. He's the new executive director of Turtle Island Restoration Project Network, TIRN, T-I-R-N. And he's also, I just want to shout out to him because no one else is going to do it here today. He's a statistics guy who massaged all the numbers. That's the wrong word. That's a manipulation, isn't it? It's called extract the information from the numbers. The Park Service did a survey of, I think it was 67,000 people. What do you think should happen in the park? Cows or wild Tule elk? And I believe the number of the extraction, where is you, Ken? 91.7% of respondents, the public, not us crazy environmentalists, the general public said, I want elk freed. I don't care, I don't come to Point Reyes to visit cows. They're all over the counties surrounding the park. So Ken was in charge of that, as well as other people who are going to give credit here today. This is a pep rally. We need your fight, we need your energy. We have a secret weapon called the truth. And to quote St. Augustine, the truth is like a lion. There's no need to defend it. Let it loose, and it will defend itself. Without further delay, Ken Bouley, are you here?
Thanks, Jack. Don't speak after Jack Gescheidt. That's my advice to you. And massage is not the right number. Tabulate is. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Ken Bouley. I am the Executive Director of Turtle Island Restoration Network. We work nationally and internationally on the environment, and we have a local group which is called SPAWN, the Salmon Protection and Watershed Network. So you might know SPAWN. Thank you. Thanks to the SPAWN staff for being here today and helping with this. We are proud to co-present with In Defense of Animals. As Jack said, we see here that there are a lot of reasons to work together where you have commonality. And we have a lot of commonality with IDA and other affinity groups. We don't have to agree on everything, but we know what we want to see in a national park. So that has been wonderful. And the coalition, coalition's too good a word, I think, for what this is. Bedlam, chaos. It's been really something. But it's been beautiful to see, really. You all know this quote, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And that has been just on display here. So in this day and age when there's precious few things to celebrate, I'm glad that you're all here today. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the plaintiffs, that's been mentioned already, Western Watersheds Project, Center for Biological Diversity, Resource Renewal Institute. Advocates for the West was the law firm that represented on the suit. And represented pro bono. Don't let anybody tell you anything different. This is not a payday for anybody. This is groups that are member-funded, grassroots organizations that expended a lot of resources, a lot of time, staff time. They were not paid for that. They were not paid even for court filing or what have you. So there's not a payday at the end of this. The payday is seeing elk walk through that fence finally and seeing the rest of the seashore restored and close to the restored. I just want to mention very briefly that although he's no longer with us, in spirit, at least Marty Griffin, who's been a mentor to many of us, who was an activist. He would phone me at age 103, no kidding, at whatever hour he felt like calling me, which I was pleased for that, and say, have you thought about this? Have you worked on that? We owe Marty a lot. Again, thank you to everybody here who's contributed to getting this progress. If you if you're late to the game and you think maybe you didn't do enough, well, I have good news for you. There's a lot to do. The work is starting now in some sense, right? So one thing we're going to have to do is defend the sediment. So you will see the same plaintiffs likely intervening in the lawsuits that you've heard about. There will still be a struggle, and pay attention, please, and support the groups that are in there, expending yet more resources to try to not lose this progress that was so hard fought. Another thing that will be happening, and you've heard about this, is that there are some workers that are displaced out in Point Reyes, and so there are groups that are working to help. There's money set aside for transition. There's time set aside, including extendable deadlines to help people transition out of the park. One of the lawsuits is about housing in the park, and it's just not really what national parks are for. But those workers should be treated justly and carefully and taken care of. So please look out for that and lend your voices and your money as you can to that. The biggest thing that we have to do is restore. So suddenly the Park Service will have 17 or so thousand acres to restore. So, in the real spirit of watch out what you wish for, it's time for us to get in there and work. And that's what Spawn and Turtle Island are going to focus on. I think people know, we shouldn't talk about the news too much, but I think people know that, the Park Service staff and budget are under attack. These are hardworking people. We've had differences of opinion, but these are hardworking people who joined the National Park Service to serve. And now they're going to have a large task on their hands without the staff that they need, without the budget that they need. This administration is obviously not spending money in a way that lines up with values, I think, that are mostly in this room. So look for chances, please, to support groups that will be working on the restoration. Look for volunteer days. There's fences to pull out. There's invasive weeds to pull out. There's native plants to plant. There's no shortage of work. One more quote that I really like is, "Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do little." And that's Edmund Burke. So please just look for some place to chip in and do something with the massive amount of work that is an opportunity for us. Okay, so those are my remarks. It is my pleasure to introduce the first speaker, other than Jack and I. Ken Brower is an environmental writer. He's written numerous books and articles. He's published in National Geographic, Atlantic, Smithsonian, and elsewhere. He's also a tough editor, I happen to know from personal experience, but tough is good in this case. Ken's father, David Brower, was a giant of the early environmental movements. He was the first executive director of the Sierra Club. People here, I think I know who I'm talking to, know who David Brower was. Ken has been an inspiration to many of us working on this issue. A combination of rigor and fairness in this man that I think is very rare. I mean, I'm glad, privileged to have gotten to know him in this struggle. So I introduce Ken Brower.
I've been thinking about what all this means, what the lessons are, and this episode that has brought us all here, and it is just an episode. It's a small episode in a big, wide battle that we're fighting for the planet. And the first thing that came to me is Frederick Douglass, The Price of Liberty is Eternal Vigilance. And same thing, price of a livable, living planet and an ecosystem with integrity, whatever integrity we have left. And the beauty of that kind of a system is eternal vigilance. And I think that's one of the things that we found here in this group. It's the Margaret Mead quote again. And she's right. we're not doing very well by either at this point. Generally, as a society, as an American society, we're not doing very well by vigilance by our democracy and our republic at the moment, and we're not doing very well by the planet. So it's gratifying to have victories like this one. The other thing I've been thinking about is because I witnessed this park being born as a kid, as my father was involved in doing a book on it and a film and lobbying for it. How tough it is to create something. It's not easy to create something beautiful that lasts. And just the hard work that went into it. I'm thinking the people who were involved, Smith Miller, who wrote the legislation, all he had to do to convince his colleagues. One of the interesting things is one of the things he had to do when he went back to Washington is convince his congressional colleagues, including Republicans back then. Some of our greatest environmentalists were Republicans in the 50s and 60s, it's hard to remember, to convince them that ranchers wouldn't be here forever. They were justifiably concerned about a national park that started out with ranches. So his job was not to celebrate the ranches in the park, which has been claimed to the founding fathers' intention. It was to assure people that the dairy industry is dying in California coast, and they'll be gone. And unfortunately, because of the subsidies that the ranchers got in the park, that didn't happen. So it's so difficult. I just watch how much work it took. My father's working in getting parks done. It's hard to make something beautiful. It's so easy for a bunch of scoundrels to come along and break it. And we're seeing that now. And it's not fair, but that's the way it goes. Think about Martin King, the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice. Well, it's not really true. I mean, it's to an extent it starts to bend that way, and almost immediately it bends back the other way. It seems like it's been a pattern. And that's what we're up against. Ken asked me to bring my signing pen for Point Reyes. My dad was at the signing of the Point Reyes legislation. And this is the pen. It's funny, I brought this pen to another gathering, and everybody went around the room, everybody photographed it, was charmed by it. I'll take it out for you. That's it. One of the pens I got. So the ink is now dry. It's been dry for half a century. But it's not really dry in the fact that we still have this part. And it's a great little pen. But I got into my prop box and I found some of these other pens that came out. And I think I'm gonna read a couple of them just to remind you of what that generation accomplished for us in preserving the earth. This is another pen. I'm gonna read this one. Two pens. One of these is the pen that signed the Wilderness Act by Lyndon Johnson. My dad was president at that ceremony too. My dad was a co-author. He helped Howard Sennheiser write. They had an office not an office, they had a table at the Cosmos Club. They went through 65 drafts of this thing, getting the language right. The work that goes into this thing to make something beautiful that lasts. And the other pen is for, what is this? It's signing some other piece of legislation. The Water Conservation Fund. So they did that in one day. This is the pen that my father's note at the time of this. This is the pen for the ceremony on October 2, 1968, when the president, that was Lyndon Johnson, signed S-119, the Wild Scenic Rivers Act, and S-827, the National Trail System Act, and S-1321, the act established the North Cascades National Park and related areas, and S-2515, the act established a Redwood National Park. That's a good one day's work for that generation. So this is the condition you all are working in. And again, it makes me think of those founding fathers. I think of Clem Miller. Clem Miller knew, he's in the picture with my dad. He's got I'm at the time, the Point Reyes Peninsula, the Sierra Club book that we did under his arm. 5 other congressmen in the room have it under their arm. My dad's thing was to hand out a copy to all congressmen when there was a legislation that was appropriate. And Clem Miller is just beaming. He knows, he has said, this is going to be the biggest achievement of my life. It's really the first. He was a young congressman at that point. It's going to be the biggest, he knew this was going to be the biggest achievement of his life, and he worked hard for it. He has 26 days left to live. In that photograph, after he signed. He was killed in a plane crash in Northern California. You look at JFK's signing. He has a little over a year before his assassination. And these are the people who gave us this. And our job is to get back into this kind of regime where instead of negating all the good legislation for the earth and for humanity, we get back to it. Days like that Johnson Day, when he signed all those bills into law. So thank you. That's what I had to say.
Hi, everybody. Ms. Jackson, I'm Jim Coda. I first got involved with Point Reyes in 1978. When those elk were supposed to come in, a guy named Murph McDonald, who had a permit for operating a ranch at Pierce Point, filed a lawsuit. And I was an attorney in the Interior Legal Office in San Francisco, and my boss handed me this complaint, and I ran upstairs to my favorite assistant U.S. attorney. And we were in court for a TRO, and I'll never forget the day because the judge, a character by the name of Judge Schnocky, who back then you could smoke in court, and he did. He looked at the permit, and Brian McCarthy, who was arguing on behalf of the rancher, was standing there next to the two of us, the AUSA and myself. And Schnocky took a drag on a cigarette, and he asked Brian McCarthy, Mr. McCarthy, what part of this sentence don't I understand? This permit may be revoked at any time for any cause, or without cause. And Brian McCarthy, of course, was just flummoxed and didn't know what to do, and the case was thrown out immediately. So that was my first connection with Point Reyes work-wise. And years later, after I retired as an assistant U.S. attorney, I got into wildlife photography, and the reason I'm here right now is because I got so upset with the way I saw the environment out there where I would photograph elk and badgers and bobcats, etc. Then I started writing about it on a blog and got really involved in it, got involved in the first lawsuit, got involved in the, as Jack said, the Tomales Point lawsuit. Anyway, I didn't carry any water out there like Jack and so many of you did. I was more behind the scenes doing a lot of writing. I'm here to thank a lot of people. First, all the people who were involved in freeing the elk, which is probably every single person here, but especially the plaintiffs and the Harvard Law Group, and the declarants in the case. All the people that did the water hauling and other activities out there that brought so much attention to what was going on. Back when I first started going out to Point Reyes, everybody was in favor of farming and ranching, it seemed to me, from what I hear in town and all. And it's been a very uphill climb and very slow, but things like Jack organized and all the rest of you being involved turned the most public opinion to feeling that ranching really doesn't belong in a national park. Leave ranching outside parks. Let's have elk instead of cows in parks. If ranching is outside the park, I'm not against it, but ranching doesn't belong in a national park. So where are we at? And this is great, we're celebrating. We didn't get the whole loaf of bread, we got, I don't know, 80% of it. I want to thank the plaintiffs that got the lawsuit going that resulted in a settlement. I want to thank the Nature Conservancy for all that it did. I'm a little bit nervous about the Nature Conservancy and Groton Rancheria and the Park Service, what they're going to do in managing the park in the next 10, 20 years. I won't be around 20 years, but we'll see how that goes. Because of that, we can't just sit back and think everything's hunky-dory, because there's still work to be done. I'm also, I would like somehow to get a home run and finish, originally the idea was we're going to get rid of all ranching. And we got rid of, 60, 70% or whatever, and that's great. But I would like to get rid of the ranching inside Point Reyes and the 10,000 acres of ranching in Golden Gate, where elk isn't the sexy thing to look at, but there are salmon and steelhead that swim through Olima Creek and Lagunitas Creek and spawn there, and those two streams are polluted in terms of pathogens, polluted in terms of nutrients, polluted in terms of substance. And so I will be sleeping a lot easier someday when those two problems get resolved. So anyway, it's great victory today, but we've got a little more work to do, and I hope everyone's up to it. Thank you.
And today is a good day to be a Tule Elk. I was out at the seashore yesterday and I saw the big breach in the fence. And I also saw the long stretch of fence that's still there. So there's work to be done. And I think everyone should be pressing the Park Service to go ahead and finish the job and get that fence down so that there's not the idea left in the world that they might build it back again and imprison the elk once again behind that fence. Now, I'm part of the plaintiff group that includes Resource Renewal Institute and Center for Biological Diversity. You've heard of my organization, Western Watershed Project. We're all represented by advocates for the West. And so our lawsuit created the reason that there's a settlement, because if you're a federal agency, you don't enter into a settlement unless you are pretty sure you're going to lose in court. But this victory that we're celebrating today comes as a result of the efforts of very many people. If you hauled water for Tule elk when they were dying of thirst, this is your victory. If you helped test the water in Point Reyes National Seashore to prove that, beyond a shadow of a doubt, water quality levels were much, much worse than allowable under the Clean Water Act, this is your victory. If you attended a protest, or spoke at an event, or showed up at your elected official's town hall meeting to hold him accountable, this is your victory. If you were a filmmaker or a photographer who documented the beauty of Point Reyes National Seashore or the devastation of what was occurring out there, this is your victory. And it is the result of all of these efforts that public opinion turned in favor of Tule elk and the narrative that we have to have cattle on Point Reyes National Seashore to have local core culture here in the Bay Area. That's what turned the battle. And when the comments were counted and 91.7% of the people who commented said Tule elk, not cattle, that's when the worm turned. And so everyone who wrote a comment, this is your victory. And, it wasn't in the lawsuit until that public comment turned. And public opinion clearly went in favor of restoring healthy ecosystems, Tule elk, marine mammals, public recreation, and all of the values that Point Reyes National Seashore was actually put there to protect. That's when, and only then, there started to be talk of a settlement. You will all remember that my organization and the other two as well sued in 2016. And the Park Service put out a new general management plan that nearly doubled down on more ranching, more impacts, and more imprisonment for Tule elk. That did not solve the problem. It was the public getting behind the idea that this national seashore belonged to all Americans and not just a handful of private interests. That's what things started. So there's a lot of work to be done. The general management plan says that a lot of the fences will come down, but they're not going to come down by themselves. So approach the Park Service and ask, what can I do to help you get those fences to come down faster? One of the things that is going on right now is the ranchers themselves, who have been bought out and are departing the seashore based on their voluntary permit buyouts, have 15 months to complete their withdrawal process. And so that's not over yet. And so we do need to have that completion happen. And it's a good time to give some grace to the ranchers who are departing so that they will actually finish what they have agreed by contract to do. And their workers are going to need to transition. This is something that the plaintiff groups have advocated for an amount of time that I'm not able to disclose because of mediation confidentiality. But this is something we strongly support, and this is something that local organizations are going to be funding, and that needs to be supported. The Nature Conservancy, who is buying out the ranchers, is going to be raising funds to make those buyouts, and that needs to be supported. And once all of these things happen, and we start getting to the beginning point of restoring Point Reyes National Seashore to a healthy native ecosystem, we are going to have eyes out on the ground watching all the time to make sure that the clock does not run backward to the time when Point Reyes National Seashore was covered in invasive weeds and non-native European annual grasses. We want to see healthy native ecosystems. We want to see those ecosystems all across the seashore, and it's going to take public pressure to make that happen. Now, I also cannot say enough about the Coast Miwok, who have stood up in favor of the Tule elk, in favor of restoring Point Reyes National Seashore, and through the settlement, Great Rancheria gets a voice in how the seashore is managed. But the Coast Miwok themselves don't necessarily get a voice in that process, only the federally recognized tribe. So to me, that is unfinished business that needs to be addressed as well. So we have work ahead of us, all of us. We have done a great measure of work today. It is a big day for Point Reyes National Seashore. Jim Coda said it was 80% of the loaf. I'm going to say it's half a loaf, but let's make sure we secure that half a loaf, and then let's keep working until the Tule elk aren't just free throughout Point Reyes National Seashore, but free throughout Golden Gate National Recreation Area and free throughout all of Northern California.
We're hoping to have a representative from the Nature Conservancy here today, and so we are going to hear from TNC, and this is Liz Harvey from the Nature Conservancy. It's just a minute long. Hopefully you can see and hear okay.
Hi, I'm Liz Harvey Roberts, a member of the development team for the Nature Conservancy here in California, and we're actively raising funds for the Point Reyes settlement, transition, and restoration. We're now in our 73rd year for the Nature Conservancy around the world, and we are laser focused on climate action and biodiversity. You see these issues here in California and of course in Point Reyes. Our decision to join mediation in the recent lawsuit was not made lightly. After investigation, it was clear that if no change was made, there would be more conflict, more legal challenges, and detrimental effects on people and nature. That's why we agreed to help. We're very glad that as part of the mediation process, we were able to find a solution to the recent litigation that everybody could agree to. We're also looking forward to participating in restoring the affected lands on the Point Reyes Peninsula so that Tule elk and other wildlife can thrive in this beautiful region. Thank you so much.
Wow, wow, wow. Oh my gosh! I can't believe that we are here today. This is so special to me and to all of you. I've come halfway around the world. You can probably hear my accent. I'm not originally from around here. One of the first animals who I came to see was the Tule elk at Point Reyes National Seashore. And I was just immediately smitten with these incredible animals. They are rare gems who clearly you guys thought were important enough to preserve. And there have been great efforts made year after year for these animals to preserve them as they rightly belong to be on their land. Now, I also want to just reiterate a few thanks. We're not here every day. Events like this are so few and far between. So to be in a place with you today, celebrating this joyous victory for the animals, is really very special indeed. And it really has taken everyone here. So, the elktivists, here you are, all together, a very special breed, a very special species, each bringing your talents and skills to bear. And that is what made this campaign so unique. Every single one of you using your skills in whatever way you can to bring this about. Because really, when we first got involved and we heard that the Tule elk were going to be shot to death, of course, really shocking stuff. No one knew about it. I would speak to all kinds of people about it. Anyone who would listen, they didn't know about it. And it was very difficult to get them to listen to the reasons why this was happening. Fortunately, because of all of you, we are now 6 years or a few years after that shooting sentence, the death sentence, it's been completely overturned. So I want to say, please give yourselves a big round of applause because you have done this. Congratulations. I also wanted to, my most heartfelt wish of standing up here with you guys today is to take a look at the bigger picture. In Defense of Animals works nationally and internationally. And unfortunately, this is part of a much larger issue that we see not just in the United States, but everywhere on the planet. I was very saddened to hear that wild horses, who are such an amazing American symbol of freedom, are being chased down by helicopters. They have their legs broken, mothers separated from their foals, and they are kept in holding pens or sold for slaughter. We see, I just had the pleasure of going to visit Yellowstone, America's best idea, the first ever national park in the whole entire world. You guys thought of that. And it was to preserve the wild animals. And now sadly, those animals, the bison, they set foot outside the park. They too are being gunned down where they stand indiscriminately. Bull next to cow, next to baby. Why is this happening? Why did this happen? How did we get there with the Tule elk? I'm very sad to say that there's a common denominator, and it's in our grocery basket. I'm sure everyone can agree that we spend far too much on groceries. The price keeps going up and up. And sadly, every time that we put a grocery in our basket that's related to the animal agriculture industry, we are paying for anti-wildlife policies across the nation and around the world. So I would say, please I hope you've enjoyed the food. All delicious, all made without harming any animals. It's the American way. Vote with your dollars, folks. Thank you ever so much.
So I mentioned before how key Harvard was. What I didn't say was, in my opinion, Harvard was the main actor to get the elk fence down, which was announced by the Park Service on December 2nd, if I have my dates right. And then, of course, the following lawsuit, the three organizations, as I call you guys, came January 8th. That was announced by all of you folks. But Harvard Animal Law and Policy Center. I was brought in by a plaintiff with Jim Coda, and we have a representative here today, not someone I work with directly. He's a third-year student at Harvard. Is that correct? Third year, and also on the executive board of the Animal Law Society. Vinny Byju.
Hi, everybody. My name is Vinny. I'm a third-year student at Harvard. I'm in my last semester there. And last year, I had the opportunity to work with the Animal Law Clinic and work on the legislation and the lawsuit going in front of the Court of Appeals. Since then, I think the time I've taken since working on the lawsuit and since the fin coming down, I've had more time to reflect and work on other cases, both in animal law and other fields. And it's only then that I've understood and gotten the full perspective of how unique and special this movement has been. I think it's very common in the legal field, especially for high-impact cases that reach such high courts, for the lawyers to kind of sweep in and start to take the issues away and for the real-world impact to fade into the background. But one of the most common themes and I think important features of this lawsuit and this movement was how grounded it was in the people. And I think seeing a group like this, hearing about, while I was working on the case, the continued pressures and the grassroots movements, I think that's what made all the difference in a case like that. For us lawyers working on the legal issues, seeing this pressure, all these faces, the dedication, that's what keeps us motivated. We got unique knowledge from people like Jack that were able to help us understand the situation on the ground better, and that all the better prepared us and equipped us to fight for you all and work together. And yesterday, I had the opportunity to go see the elk myself, and I think that was the best kind of encapsulation of looking at an elk eye to eye and seeing all this work, particularly someone just starting my legal career and getting interested in activism. It's often hard in these times to stay motivated. I think seeing pressure and seeing the continued work that you all do is what ultimately does that and lets us keep fighting the good fight. So thank you all so much for
Well, one of the joys of being involved as an activist in this movement is meeting a lot of wonderful people in community, which we desperately need now, you know, on the world stage, as well as the national stage, as well as obviously for this issue. And one of those people I met was an activist at a lot of the demonstrations when I was editing that little bit of film. It's like, oh, there she is again. Before I knew her, there she is again, there she is again. Would you please welcome Lia Wilbourn?
I remember when I first went to my first Point Reyes demonstration, and I was just so inspired to see so many people speaking up for the Tule elk and against the desecration of the seashore. So thank you to everyone who's been involved in this incredible accomplishment. Thank you. And of course, as some others have hinted at, it's not only bad when it happens in a national park in our backyard. This happens anywhere there is ranching, including, as we've seen, local, organic, grass-fed. The USDA's Wildlife Services kills hundreds of thousands of wild animals every year, primarily to protect the profits of animal agriculture. So what can we do about all this? The leading environmental scientists, including at Oxford, Stanford, and UC Berkeley, have stated that the number one most effective thing that we can do to reduce our impact on Earth and reverse the climate crisis is to cut out dairy and meat and phase out animal farming. So in addition to that, the leading nutrition organizations in the world, including the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, have stated that a well-planned plant-based diet is not only healthy for all stages of life, but can help to prevent some of the major human diseases, while animal products increase those risks and fuel zoonotic diseases like the current bird flu crisis. But aside from all of that, right next to what was done to the Tule elk is something just as cruel and worse: the standard practices in animal farming. And in this case, the dairy industry, forcibly impregnating young female cows over and over again. And after 9 months, when a mother gives birth, they take her babies, as she tries to chase after them and bellows in anguish, often for days. Her female calves are confined alone in tiny hutches. Her horn buds are burned off, cauterized, and her male babies, her male calves, are sent to be slaughtered. Then, when she stops producing enough milk to be profitable, she is slaughtered too. If any of us saw this cruelty and violence in front of us, most of us would be horrified. And likely none of us would want someone that we care about to work in a slaughterhouse. But it's kept hidden and it's marketed as high welfare and humane to keep us buying. So speaking up about this is not extreme. What's extreme is what animal farming is doing to our planet, to wild animals, and the over 80 billion animals who are tormented and killed every year for their flesh, milk, and eggs. So let's challenge this might makes right mentality of human supremacy and domination over all other species and the natural world. Every day, we can vote with our dollars and reject this cruel and destructive industry by choosing a plant-based diet and advocating for the principle that humans should live without exploiting animals. And that is all that vegan means. So for justice and compassion for all of us earthlings and our precious planet, and in the face of injustice, especially for those with privilege, silence is not an option. Thank you.
I really have no more right to be up here than pretty much everybody else here. But I do want to say a quick thank you to my dear friend Diane Gentili, because if it weren't for Diane, who rallied her friends to see Skylar's documentary, The Shame of Point Reyes, I may not have gotten this involved. So thank you, Diane. I have met so many amazing, powerful, beautiful people of integrity. I mean, you know, and I'm sorry that Laura Cunningham isn't here and that Skylar's not here and numerous others, but this is a great crowd, you know. And one of the things for me personally that was rewarding was that my dear close friend, Marty Griffin, and his wife Joyce, we rekindled our friendship for a great amount of both pleasure and activism. And Marty is smiling today, right? As Katie said, Marty would call you up anytime and like, hey, you need to do this, and have you thought about that? And he could get you going. Marty was an amazing jewel. Really, I'm so pleased to have been able to participate to the degree I have. One of the things I'm proud of is being the Pony Express to run the water samples over to the lab in the East Bay. After all, you really, you know, hardy people got up at the crack of dawn in the freezing weather and took up all the samples and stuff. But you know what's interesting here is that this group is a totally amorphous group, right? So, you know, with Laura's email list and our demonstrations and in defense of animal and Jack's work, all this is a coalition, but it is a very loose coalition. The loosest I've ever been involved with, and yet look how powerful we are. Because look at what we've accomplished. 4 years ago, would we have said this? Now, you know, we made the conditions proper for the Nature Conservancy to drop in and do their part. But everybody did their part. Everybody made the ground a little bit more fertile for this to happen. You maybe wrote a letter to the editor, Tess Elliott, again and again and again. and maybe finally got it published, and other, letters to the editor, and were interviewed in articles and such. These are all the little pieces that have brought us here today. And as Erik and others have said, we have a lot of work left to do. But we have this amorphous group whose amorphosity, if that's a word, is really a great strength. And it's something that we're going to have to replicate and continue to do, particularly in the onslaught of fascism that is making rapid advances in taking over our beloved country, right? So keep this model in mind. We're going to keep this organization going. Recognize that this is how people can address how to make democracy real. Because we are real Democrats. We are people who have made democracy actually happen in America today. Rare and beautiful. And God bless you all. Give yourself a hand. Thank you.
I lived in Olema and Point Reyes from 68 to 71. And we lived in a 19th century farmhouse without electricity and a 5-gallon hot water heater powered by kerosene. And deer meat was a staple, maybe once a month, but not local deer, but imported deer, Asian fallow deer brought into Point Reyes by a doctor who thought they were cute. So we'd go pick off these little 80-pound deer and feed 20 people. Anyway, I'm extremely humbled to be here today because in a lifetime of political engagement, you don't get to celebrate successes very often. I've got a couple. In 1962, I was one of the organizers of a protest against nuclear power that JFK invited into the White House. The only time in the history of the White House that's happened. Huey Newton came to see me. My family was the Diggers. We printed the first newspaper of the Black Panther Party. We had a success recently with the release of Leonard Peltier, and I was one of his. Peter Matheson and I were his 2 non-native advisors for 50 years. So I came today, and I was going to give a lot of cautionary words from a lifetime of struggle and not so many successes, but I'm actually overwhelmed by the joyousness, the inventiveness, the artistic freedom, the humility, and the anonymous labors that brought this thing to fruition. So I thought, what could I point out? Well, I could give you an 83-year-old's perspective for what it's worth, because I can't teach you how to do anything better than you've already done it. But I can tell you some stuff that's laying in the cut. So let me say that without taking too much time. What we're all involved with is actually a spiritual and not a political revolution. It's a revolution from considering people a separate entity, separate from the environment, separate from the planet, separate from all the things that actually make up our life. There's no one in this room who has been separate from oxygen for 10 seconds, separate from sunlight, separate from microbes in the soil, separate from pollinating insects, separate from predators, separate from the people growing cotton, spinning cotton, sewing cotton, the clothes that you wear. So we're inhabiting 2 realities at the same time. One is this sack of flesh, which the ancient Chinese called the guest, because they come and go. Our nervous systems are organized by our brains and a sense of self. That goes without saying. But that self is not an organ, it's not a physical thing, it has no separate standing from the rest of the universe. And you can see that by just trying to cut away the umbilical cords that attach us to the universe. So there are growing numbers of people that are starting to understand that. And they're quite different in affect and in intention than people who see humans as the top of the pyramid and the planet as a source of extraction and profit. However, we're all made and supported by the same universe. I don't like the fact that I'm made of the same stuff as Donald Trump, but he has equal standing to be here as what I do. So there's a cautionary tale in this moving forward. So there's three things that are concerning me right now. My first concern is, what are the enforcement mechanisms for this precarious treaty or this precarious settlement? How will it be enforced? The second is, what would be the strategy to control the narrative of the event, which you all have done extremely well. I mean, I tip my hat to you. And the third would be, if we make defensive nature the spear tip to end capitalism or neoliberalism or even the eating of meat, we're going to amass our entire culture against us, and we're going to set ourselves backwards. This is a huge way of thought, and it's from the 14th century. This idea of God is up in the sky and there's a spirit up there and everything on earth is just matter to be dealt with. So to make people our enemy is going to be a lose, because these people followed the laws, what they thought was right, the customs and everything. The customs and everything. We need to be as compassionate to them as we are to the animals. So you have to say that we're involved in a 100-year struggle. And so that means we all have to make our sense of time a little more elastic, a little more compassionate, which I've heard everyone speak about today. I'm so grateful for that. The people who work in the Park Service, but even the ranchers, they're just following a different train of thought, a different belief system. So for instance, in a group that I advised for a long time, Project Coyote in Marin County, we actually succeeded in getting the county to stop hiring federal killers and killing off the predators. We worked with all the ranchers. We explained to them. They listened. These people, they said that I didn't become a rancher to kill all the wildlife. That's not what I'm about. So we saved the county $285,000 a year, and we taught them how to fence better, how to get dogs to protect their crops, and how to let dominant pairs of coyotes mate and breed on their land, and they would drive the offenders out, any new coyotes. So these people, the ranchers, the meat eaters, they're all accessible to something. If you find some commonality, you can talk to them. Up in Petrolia, we turned the whole county around the Mattole River into a salmon protecting watershed area with ranchers, with loggers, with dope growers, all these people who all love the salmon. So Paul Hawken wrote a book called Blessed Unrest, how the largest movement in the world came into being and why no one saw it coming. And it demonstrates that the global environmental movement is the largest in human history, with over 1 million organizations. And what's interesting about it is it lacks central leadership, it lacks a unifying ideology, it's decentralized and always local and grassroots. And finally, it addresses a wide range of interconnected issues, environmental protection and social equity. So if you look at the figures of people going to national parks, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, 13,297,000 visitors this year. The Grand Canyon, 4,000,007. Zion, 4,000,006. Yellowstone, 4,000,005, up 5.5% from last year. Rocky Mountain, 4 million. Yosemite, 3.8. Grand Teton. What this says to me is there are vast numbers of people that want to be inspired by nature, that love nature, that need the peace of nature, and they're on your side basically if you treat them with compassion and enemies. They may eat hamburgers. They may also be your allies in saving a park or saving the elk and saving wildlife. I grew up on a ranch. We didn't spray anything. But I understand why people are against industrial farming. However, there's a big difference between saying we want to get rid of all ranchers and saying let's employ the ranchers, since this is a national issue, they're not going to just dry up and go away. Let's employ them to pull out invasive plants, to protect riparian areas, to get rid of parasites and hosts. and give them a job and put them on our side. They're not going away. World War II didn't end fascism, as we see, don't we? Yeah, the prime rule of nature is diversity. So trying to end meat eating is a very different battle than trying to ensure that our national diet consumes less meat and that it's raised in small enough numbers so as not to override the carrying capacity of place. Nature involves all of it. It's not just our ideology or what we believe. So you have to have some place in the, like nature, you have to have the generosity to let other believers and other people exist. But because we're all interdependent, this gives us a right to contact them and demand that they operate within the norms and confines and sustainability of our planet. None of this is going to happen in a hurry. The best way we can move forward is by expressing our values in everything that we do. My friend, the great writer and late great writer, David Harris, said, "Values that are not expressed in action don't exist." Values that are not expressed in action don't exist. So if we're involved in a spiritual struggle, our values and practices have to be spiritual in nature. This is why I became a Zen Buddhist priest. That means we have to treat people that we disagree with or that behave conversely to what we believe with dignity and respect and try to understand why they feel that way. Because we will never have enough power to exterminate those beliefs. If people get knowledge, they will change on their own. And finally, everybody here can make a 2-minute little video of some miracle of nature and post it on YouTube or TikTok or whatever. Some way to make the public aware of the magic and the diversity and the extraordinary miracles of natural life. How wasps paralyze caterpillars and drag them into their nest. How wolf spiders hunt. What happens to riverbeds and flats when predators disappear and the deer outgrow. Congratulations, this is a great step. You guys have done it a lot better than I ever did it when I was young, but it's going to be a long haul. So it's going to be in your children's lifetime or your grandchildren's lifetime before this huge ship of state really turns. So you've got to not let yourself burn out. You've got to keep your good humor and your patience and just don't give up. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Mr. Coyote. This next person who's going to speak, we've really seen today how everyone sort of did their little piece, little or big piece, that people brought their talents that contributed in whichever way they can or they were inclined to. This guy walked out into Tallest Point, to the Elk Reserve, carrying, he'll correct me, but 40 or 50 pounds of camera gear over and over and over again, and took pictures of elk in trouble, sometimes emaciated, sometimes struggling in drying mud holes, sometimes remains of elk, and so on. And these pictures, as difficult as they are, really, I think, move people as you would expect. And so it's just one more person that I'm glad to have met in this struggle, and I'm happy to introduce Matthew Polvorosa-Kline.
So I'm supposed to speak after Peter Coyote, one of the most famous voices in all of cinema history. I mean, I was listening to his voice on those Ken Burns documentaries. I'm definitely not going to ad-lib this, so I wrote a little something. First of all, Ken, thank you for the introduction. Instrumental guy in this whole thing. So thank you so much, Ken. It's wonderful to see everyone here. This upcoming summer will be 17 years since I took my first photographs of the Tallest Point Tule Elk. Since then, I have spent countless hours in their company, observing, photographing, filming, and sharing space and time with these sentient beings. They certainly left a lasting impression on me, but little did I know at the time when I started that these majestic wild ones would change my life. Now I feel like I can finally say I've given them something in return. Someone asked me if I thought my work bringing this fence thing, this die-off to light, would lead to the fence being removed, and I never doubted for a second that the fence would be coming down. I just thought it might take 100 years. But it didn't take 100 years to get there, and that is a credit to so many in this room. So many people, I mean, I can't name the amount of people. I think the email list alone is 100 people. And there's so many people that aren't here today that I wish I could see them in person, because I'd have the biggest hugs in the world for them. So it's a credit to all of our work, to the many in this room who had a hand in this effort. I salute you and greatly appreciate you. We have a lot to be grateful and hopeful for. Just think about how far things have come. I mean, just a few years ago, we were at that Bear Valley gathering, and the next day we found out that the general management plan was, not going in our direction. They're going to cull elk, the fence is going to stay up. So, it's been a long road, and we're in a better place now. At least it feels that way, but then you look outside and you see what's going on, and you try to keep that hope alive. So I did want to say something, because I didn't know if some of our local media that hasn't been too kind to us might be here. But for those who might question our motivations, our desires to see our public land held to a higher standard, to see our one and only West Coast National Seashore living up to its most beautiful and worthwhile ideal, I will say it's not environmentalists ruining the environment. It might be environmentalists bursting a bubble, or what one might ironically call one's ecosystem, but we are not endeavoring on the wrong side of history here. We are making some history, and we are guided by a promising vision which takes into account the future generations in our midst. We are doing the work for the right reasons, make no mistake about it. We did right by the Tule Elk, and we are doing right by our public lands. In the middle of a biodiversity loss crisis, we are honoring our precious wildlife, and we are honoring our endangered coastal prairie. No one ever mentions that in the media or letters to the editor about the coastal prairie. It's less than 2% left in California, and it's the most species-rich grassland type in North America. No one talks about that. These are the things we're fighting for, not just the Tule Elk, who's our emblem. That there are iconic native endemic species that, numbers around 5,500 in all of the state of California, when they used to number, the estimate is 500,000. We've made tremendous progress. I just want to say, and end on this note, it's worth reminding ourselves that we are not alone on this here earth. We actually share this vastly interconnected pale blue dot with countless other fascinating, intelligent, curious, and wild, familiar and unfamiliar, never dull, and quite utterly astonishing life forms. The complex fabric of life and the well-being of this interconnected world is worth speaking up for. We all have a stake in this. Keep on keeping on, and thank you, everyone.
I want to thank a few people who aren't here while the amazing Laurel is doing magic over there, as those young people do with those computers and stuff. Liz Dodge is a scientist, citizen, activist, water carrier, giving tours of the wonderful ranches for people who don't have enough manure on their shoes. She also is the contact to reach Doug Lovell, who is the independent water engineer who gave us the actual concrete proof of what we already knew, which is the place is freaking polluted with cow manure, because you got thousands of cows in the park. What a surprise! So Liz, thank you so much. When people give a round of applause for Liz Dodge, he doesn't even want to stand up. It's fine. We have well, she's not here. Yes. We have a 35 years in the field biologist who studied Tule elk and has been such an incredible font of information for all of us. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. Raise your hand if you know who I'm talking about without saying the name. So it's Julie. Julie Phillips is not here. She was trying to make it. There are people in the room who don't know. My own brother here, forced to eat vegan food, the poor guy. Doesn't know who Julie Phillips is. I wish she was here. She, like Matthew, speaks with great heart. Sure. So anyway, I wish there were more people here, but I just want to go through a few names here. So one more round of applause for Julie Phillips, please. So she knows the company. And then he was the star of that little film I did at the beginning of the end. A guy who hauled more water than anybody, who spent more time in the park by far than I have. Behind the scenes, hates the limelight like I used to before I, unfortunately, sorry Matt, got over my fear of the limelight. And that's a young man, a beautiful, he's the kind of guy that loves nature and being in nature more than he likes being in front of people. Can you relate? Anybody relate to that? And that's Derek Clary, if he's still here. Are you still here, Derek? Darn you. Well, that proves my point. He ran out of the room. And then I want to thank a guy who's always working behind the scenes. He couldn't be here today because he's working. Oh, wait a second. There he is, behind the camera in the back. His name is Tony Sagal, Silver Reaction Media. These people, like me, are thanking you for your incredible hundreds of hours of tireless filming and schlepping and driving up from the South Bay, 2 hours one way to Point Reyes, 4 hours round trip, countless times. And then, of course, as you guys know, which is why I'm not a professional videographer, don't want to be, never will be, hundreds more hours editing this stuff, making stories, making a narrative arc. So Tony does all that and more. Huge heart, even though he doesn't like to hug me. I forgive you for that, Tony. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing, including filming me right now. And then there's another filmmaker in our midst who isn't here today. And I don't know whether that's good news or bad news, but he's the reason I'm here today. I saw a little documentary film he did, The Power of Film, called The Shame of Point Reyes. His name is Skylar Thomas. And I want that guy to see this film and hear you guys applaud him and give that guy some love, which he can use a lot more of. He's feeling really beaten down. He feels this stuff in his heart the way many of us does. He wears it on his sleeve. I've been doing this weird ass, Skyjack podcast where I'm the shy, quiet one, the good cop, which shows you where Skylar's coming from. So I just want him to eventually see this recording and hear that we really know him, appreciate his work. Thank you, Skylar Thomas. He was not going to speak, then he was going to speak, and now he's not going to speak, is Dr. Bob Johnson, a retired, what is your professorship at UC Davis, Bob? Tell us, you're not shy. He's wearing the cop hat in the back, perfect. Anyway, he was really heavily involved in a lot of the water testing, and he's more scientist than I'll ever hope to be or want to be. Wicked sense of humor. I kind of wish he would come up here and tell some jokes, but I just want to recognize Bob Johnson, please, a round of applause for his work. Forgive me, Jocelyn. This was a private text to me, and I told her, I'm going to read this, okay? And I didn't hear her say no. This is today, like trying to confirm, because, well, you'll hear. This is short. I'm trying hard to stay sane. This is Jocelyn Knight. I'm overwhelmed with mom and world news for mothers in the hospital right now. Nightmares, keeping sleep elusive. Working on walks in the forest and nature healing while navigating the inevitable. Thanks for checking in. Hope the event today goes as you wish. I want to be there, just cannot face a crowd just now. I think I would just cry the whole time. I rethought my speech and decided I was just going to express my gratitude for those that paved the way for us, to reiterate that it was folks like Marty, Griffin, Huey, Johnson, and others that started this whole endeavor decades ago, and to acknowledge your efforts, thank you, Matthew's photos, Matthew Klein, and his advocacy, the Resource Renewal Institute, the Western Watersheds Project, In Defense of Animals, Professor Johnson, Doug Lovell, Liz Dodge, Matt Maguire, Ken Bouley, Kenneth Brower, Kenny Slayan, who's quietly our timekeeper over there who likes to lurk in the shadows, but I'm going to pull him out one day. Renee Voss, an attorney sitting in the front row who's been really helpful, and I've just been paying more attention to Renee's good work, interpreting this legal freaking firestorm raining down on us now. I'm just very proud and grateful that I was able to contribute in my small way, as Jocelyn, her small way, right. As all of you know, documenting the pollution in the park and photographer for photograph. She's a really good professional documentary photographer. Just can't get enough thanks to her. Oh, I'm sorry, back to her. Best of luck, and say hello to Peter Coyote for me. The last time I saw him, I was photographing his wedding. I hope someone takes great photos and video, Tony, so I can see everyone. Thank you, Jocelyn Knight. Coast Miwok representative who's been with us in many of the, I can't even imagine her position, frankly, being a Coast Miwok who's watching ranchers say, you don't understand, we've been here 3, 4, 5, 6 generations, our people. Oh, at the Point Reyes Dance Palace, you know what I'm talking about, without any awareness, apparently, that there are people in this room, including Theresa Harlan was there, I'm introducing, have been there for hundreds of generations on this land, and she's working for Felix Cove to try to liberate that place and decolonize it. We wish her well on that journey, so please welcome Theresa Harlan.
Nice to be here with all of you relatives. I just came from a spring equinox gathering of Indigenous LGBTQ BIPOC relatives, and it was just the medicine I needed. Because as Peter said, we need community, we need relationship, we need understanding. And in the events that we're experiencing that are shocking, but also at the same time, they resemble what we've already gone through in the 1930s. So this is the time when we have to be together and be in relationship with each other. And so one of the things that I wanted to share is that in our work to rematriate Felix Cove, which is my mother, who was Coast Miwok Talmoko, identified as Tomales Bay Indian, her ancestors lived there since time immemorial, and it's a remnant of what it once was. And so our vision is to bring it back to the beauty that the ancestors intended it to be. And yes, Jack, when ranchers are lamenting about having to leave, I ask, who lamented for our ancestors? Who lamented when we were driven out? So what I wanted to share is that, in the face of, the 28th boycott, no purchasing, and I was listening to Robin Wall Kimmer's book, Service Berries, on my drive out to Clem Miller Center. It really hit home about how we have to be gifting and how we have to understand and respect the earth's natural gifts, earthly gifts, and how we share with each other, how we rely on each other and build these relationships. And so that is in my mind, and that is how I am managing to do this healing, because with new leadership at the park, we do not have the same access we did with the retiring superintendent, watching Nature Conservancy come in, watching power, watching cash power work and have all of the abilities to be at the table when all of us are not. Now is like the experience of which everyone is now experiencing what it was like, to be without voice, without consent, without having the ability to say what happens in your own home. So I just want to thank Jack. I want to thank all the folks that were mentioned here, that we became a community over listserv, and also I was reflecting about being at the rally and getting to know folks, and it's great to be here. But I really strongly urge us to continue the community making. We have to support each other in whatever we do, and it's not finished, and it's gonna take years, just like for me, rematriating Felix Cove. I may be too old to enjoy it by the time, it happens, but I am not giving up. And also, let's make this community, bigger and broader and browner. Let's have more Indigenous folks, more Latinx folks, and as I said at the town hall, the ranch workers are in the same situation that my family was. Our family were laborers along with the ranch workers with no agency and just being told to get out. So, you know, I again, community is in my heart, relationship building. The park needs to understand us as Indigenous people, that we're real human beings. We have, and I need to understand park leadership as real human beings. And so I'm just thankful for all of you being here and thankful for the opportunity to even be invited to be part of this community.
I love Point Reyes. I love the Tule Elk. I love the place, and I feel like my soul is Point Reyes. And I know that maybe sounds dramatic, but I actually believe that my soul is part of the place of Point Reyes. And yeah, as Jack mentioned, I started for elk along with Spirulina, who is a dear friend. And we essentially started this people power movement behind the work that others had been doing. And I can't tell you how many countless hours I put into the campaign, but I'm gonna sort of speak from my heart here and tell you maybe the things that you haven't heard from me. So I stepped back from the campaign in 2022. And it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, because I felt like I was leaving my spirit behind. I felt like I was disappointing all of you for leaving. But actually what I realized was that the work transcends me. Like, this movement gained so much momentum that it actually didn't need me to be there anymore, and it actually grew beyond my wildest dreams. And I just have immense gratitude for all of you for carrying that. It's a truly humbling experience. And I visited last April. I went back to Point Reyes. It was my first time back since 2020, because that was a crazy time. And I moved back to Michigan. And, but last April I visited, and again, I was struck with this, I knew I wanted to go see the elk, and I was really scared to go back. I felt like I felt like the land would be mad at me. I felt like the Tule elk would be disappointed that I had left. But again, I returned, and I was met with the opposite. I was welcomed back as if I had never left, and I saw the Tule elk just gallivanting so eloquently and so elegantly on the cliffside, and the cliffs were green, and the elk were happy, and it felt like freedom. It felt like freedom. And by the way, shout out to Charity, who came with me on that hike back in April, one of the only people I would trust to go back with me, and I wouldn't be self-conscious to cry. Here's my cat. Anyway, I went back and I felt welcomed. And it just goes to show that sometimes we can be a little hard on ourselves. And I guess I share this story because when we fight for what we believe in, when we seek to make change, when we actually make history, this is historic, I feel like we can be tested and we can go through these dark nights of the soul where, like, there were so many times where I was like, what's the point of fighting anymore? Like, there's so much opposition, or am I doing enough? Even though I was doing everything I possibly could. So I would have these thoughts, and what I learned from working in this campaign and seeing it grow beyond my wildest dreams and seeing so many people fight alongside me is that, like, I just learned to value every drop toward the future I dream of. Every conversation, every letter to the editor that was written, every song that was written, every video that was edited, every person who came to the town halls, every person who stood in the rain wearing black lace veils during torrential downpours holding onto the altar, everyone who showed up. There's no hierarchy in what is a valuable action and what's not a valuable action. Like, it all matters so much. And I also learned to accept our differences, right? We don't all think alike. And I really learned to love people's differences, and we work together anyway. We work toward a common goal, even if some things we don't agree on. And that's really powerful to do. And in time, I just hope that we all learn also to tend ourselves and to take breaks and to trust that we aren't doing this alone, that we actually never do anything alone. And that's the power, as Theresa so eloquently said, she's the only speech I heard, is that we do it in community. And sometimes we have to back down for a little bit, and others carry the torch, and that's normal. We need that. So, and if anything, we deserve a celebration. So thank you for letting me be part of the celebration. I value and respect all of you very deeply, and thank you.
I was a Tule Elk docent in the park for 4 seasons. I believe that dreams, intent, and community exhibited here can positively change the direction and outcome for living creatures. Wildlife know and feel when they are loved and cherished. Many years ago, while alone on the expansive bluffs of the Lost Coast, I was surrounded by a herd of rutting males of Roosevelt elk and females. And the Roosevelt elk are the largest elk in North America. I was pinned against a giant solitary oak tree on an expansive savanna. Right then, I fell in love with these magnificent beings. Years later, the opportunity to become a Tule Elk docent at Point Reyes National Seashore was inspired by this experience. Teaching folks to love the rare Tule elk was a calling. For 4 seasons, I brought my heart to this work. Only 4 days ago, I was on the rim of the Grand Canyon, surrounded by a herd of towering Rocky Mountain elk. Ungulates are a sublime presence in my life.
Recording in progress.
In India, several years ago, at dusk, I came face to face with magnificent, high, tall, huge, wrapped buck of sandbar deer. We stared at one another without fear. The sandbar deer is the largest species of deer in the world, and it sustains tigers. In my yard, I'm followed around by deer who help by eating the leaves and branches I hold, making fertilizer for me. I will spare the details of my deep concern for witnessing the suffering of the elk at Point Reyes that we've all heard about and know about, that were brought on by the drought and their entrapment, because I believe you all know the history and similarly possess the empathy we all feel. I see opportunities everywhere for reintroduction around the state to restore damaged ecosystems, and believe we must acknowledge their critical role in ecosystem health. It wasn't until I met Jack and others that I finally saw the tide turn about the fight that I felt I was making by myself in 2013 when I first saw the suffering. To save the elk, many of you have hauled water. For that, I want to express my sincerest gratitude. May your lives be filled with love and the magic and the respect that you have shown in protecting the lives of animals and their legacy. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Laura, you got the opportunity, I don't know if you know this, to close out the speaking. So that's the way it worked. You're last, take us home.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I just want to say welcome to my world of public lands, livestock grazing, and monitoring. So I really just want to thank everyone, though. That's the main thing I want to say is thank you for getting involved in this. I mean, I've gotten to know so many of you, and you are all amazing. I mean, all the time you've spent on this, I mean, every one of you is just really, really helpful. And I think we would not have gotten this far without all of you people in the room and on the Zoom, every single person. I want to come and shake your hand and give you a big hug. So thank you, thank you. And I'll just quickly say two things. I always hear people say at the beginning of these types of like campaigns, it's a done deal. You know, what can I do? What can I do as one person? You know, we can't stop public lands, livestock grazing. We can't stop these factory farms. And guess what? We can if we work together and are persistent and keep doing it. And look how far we've come. Second thing, yeah, we have more work to do. One thing I've learned working all around the state of California, our job is never done. Our volunteer work is never done. We just have to keep pushing. But look how far we've come. We've got those organic dairies out of the seashore. Yay. Thanks to all of you. And hope to see you guys this spring in person. Thanks.